about the four ways that God speaks to us. We talked about learning about your prophetic personality. Now, what we're going to do is the next 4 days, I'm going to present one specific way that I believe God speaks to us. And you're going to begin to see, like, does that resonate with me? Is that something I've experienced? And then at the last day of this devotional, we're going to talk about figuring out your primary prophetic personality. Now, I want to be clear. God's voice is sacred. It's his voice. So to put it in a category would be diminish his majesty and his sovereignty. But the goal of this is to give you a starting point, to get you to a place where you actually connect in some specific way so you can begin to develop your relationship. It's like the love languages, right? To say, well, if you can just affirm your spouse, then that's what marriage is. That's what love is. No, that would diminish what real love is and the fullness of it and the mystery of it. So I'm giving you these methods not to uncomplicate it in a way that makes it seem not sacred or sovereign or anything like that, but to just uncomplicate it so you can start somewhere. So let's talk about the first one. Now, none of these are in specific order for importance or the way that God sees it. It's just to give you one way. So let's open up our Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 8 through 9. Now, this whole section of the chapter, you can read. There's a full story there of a priest named Eli and a little boy named Samuel. In fact, you can even go all the way back to before Samuel was born and his mom pleading as a woman who was not able to have kids, actually pleaded to God to give her a child. And she finally got this miracle baby. And she told God, if you give me this baby, I will dedicate him to you. And this is why Samuel is living in the temple at the right age. She brought him to the temple and he's living there. And we kind of pop into verse 8. It says, then Eli, who was the priest, realized that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, go and lie down. And if he calls you, say, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Now, where are we popping into this story? Well, Samuel keeps hearing this voice. He keeps thinking it's Eli the priest. He keeps going to Eli. Eli says, it's not me. Go lay down. And this happens over and over until finally the priest realizes, I think God is speaking to this little boy, Samuel, and God is, and he interacts. Now, if you were kind of raised in the Christian faith, if you were raised in a community where we talked about hearing God's voice, this would have been that foundational scripture. This would have been that thing where they would say, this is how God speaks. He speaks to us, and we say to him, speak, for your servant is listening. And I was taught that this was how God spoke to us. And what I found is that this is a unique way in which God speaks to us. If you're a hearer, I would consider you the ears in the room. You're the person who God speaks to through words, phrases, conversations, narratives. You are ones that can literally hear a phrase or a word or something God has said, and you have a conversation that gets linked from different times and different places throughout your life. You receive God's voice through those words. And it's not just through reading, it's actually through like a narrative. You actually experience God beautifully and you encounter his voice as a direct dialogue with your heart from the heart of God, from the mouth of God. There were lots of hearers in scripture. And I just pointed out one to you, Samuel. That's kind of a classic example of a hearer. But God used words to get people's attention, to have conversations with them. And that is very, very true. And so it's very important to understand that as a hearer, God interacts with you through words, phrases, and through narrations. And so one of the cool aspects of a hearer is that because you hear in stories and you hear in words and you hear in conversations, journaling can be very powerful for you because you actually hear this direct thing from God and you're able to write it down and go back and have that spoken from God. If you hear God in that way, it is unique. It is profound. It is a unique way in which God interacts with you. And I want you to know something. God does not interact with everybody that way. He does speak to us through his word, and we can all read his letters and his words to us. But if you're getting that divine interaction, it's very powerful. So there are strengths and there are weaknesses. So if that's you and you go, I think I've heard God before, or I've heard him, but I'm not sure if it's him, or I've never really looked for him, I want you to go back and begin to ask, has God been speaking to me through words, phrases, conversations, or is there a word that continues to follow me around? I have a twin sister. She's a hearer. Deborah is one of those that God speaks to through words. And usually it starts out with a word or a phrase or something he's saying. We went on a trip a couple months ago, and she said, God has been speaking to me about seasons. It's a new season. And I'm not kidding. Everywhere we went, God was telling her things. It was through a worship song, it was through a song on the radio, it was through her reading, it was through somebody else giving her a word. And it was all about new seasons. Now, if I looked at that and thought, I have to hear God like that, then I would guarantee I wasn't hearing God speak to me because I wasn't getting it like that. She was, because she's a hearer. So, if that's how God has created you, I'm going to understand that your prophetic personality is a hearer. God speaks to you through words, phrases, conversations, dialogues, and through journaling. All right, tomorrow we're going to explore another prophetic personality.